soon as the valley was gone. We feel just as heavy as lead, but we never get up to the stars and bring the breakfast up to bed.
Okay, welcome to episode 15 of God's Own Scale. Crikey, number 15. That sounds like I'm in serious territory and in serious danger of this thing going on for some time. It's probably just over 12 months the podcast has been going now. And on the call with me today, I've got somebody I think was episode 2, one of my very first callers and guests on the podcast. I've got Mr. Peter Riley back with me. Hi, Peter. How are you?
Hello, I'm fine. A lot has gone past since we last spoke, hasn't it? I would say.
If you could have had a crystal ball, Peter,
Yeah.
to say that the world would have gone through what it has in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
I think you could have made yourself $1 million, couldn't you?
Well, if you could only predict it, I mean, that would be the thing, wasn't it? You know, worldwide pandemics and what else?
God. Yeah, elections, Brexits.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, it's a different world, isn't it, that we're living in?
Absolutely. Because last time we spoke, I think we were in the rosy glow of just having won the best participation game at Salute.
Yes.
And so that sort of seems to have set us off on a bit of a path. I mean, we've done a few upgrades to the website, the Wargamer Collection Calculator website, and then sort of this all hit.
I know it's I mean, everything and every plan has just been thrown to the wind, hasn't it? And blown away, to be honest. But it looks like, and I'm going to touch a little bit of wood next to me. It looks like we're just coming through the other side of it, and let's keep our fingers crossed that next year the show season will get back underway and we can meet up again. So just referring back then, you've just mentioned Wargamer Collection Calculator?
I think we've changed it. Dave made me change it to War Games Collection Calculator. Right. I think we might be dropping the War Games at some point, but
okay.
Who knows? Marketing is a strange world.
It is. But just for anybody that isn't aware of what that is, Peter, do you want to just give us a quick rundown on what you're talking about?
Okay, well, Wargamer Collection Calculator was really our attempt to get prices for people's collections, so they could put realistic prices on their figures and their collections. And so part of that was about trying to find insurance. So how do you insure your collections against loss or damage or whatever. So we decided to put up a calculator on the website where you could put your collection in and you can get a valuation of your wargaming figures so that you could present that to an insurer and say, I'd like to insure these as part of my house insurance or whatever insurance you wanted. So that's how Collection Calculator was born. But since then, we've done lots of upgrades. You can now throw up an Excel spreadsheet of your collection onto the website and get your collection calculated. So we've done lots of different things. We've expanded our directory. So I think there's about 1,500 different shops and traders on our website, and also you can manage your own parts of the website. So you can go in and you can look at blogs and directories and all that sort of thing. And part of it was that because we had this hit with the Battle of the Little Bighorn over the last season, we did it at Joyous 6 as well. And we thought, actually, there might be a way of maybe replicating this for sets of rules for sort of younger players and older players to get actually together to get people into the hobby. So we've been quite busy.
You have, and that's really going to be the meat and bones of this conversation. We touched on it in the first conversation we had over 12 months ago now, about this system that you were going to come up with where people could write their own rules for gaming battles. I know that much. But just before we go on to that, one thing that interested me, and you may correct me here, I may be wrong, but regarding the insurance aspect of the collection calculator. Is it right that people generally undervalue the figures that they have and the collections that they
yeah,
have?
absolutely. I mean, if it seems to go to extremes, they either overvalue them to the point where it it seems impossible to actually get a unit of figures that are that price, or they
Yes.
undervalue them in the extreme. So what we've tried to do is get a little bit of an average. So we want to give a fair price for a fair unit of figures, so that people can say, well, I've bought them, I've based them, I've built them, I've painted them, I've put the effort in, and they're ready to go. And then they put a silly price on it because they don't have any idea what the value of their collection is. So that's what we've tried to do, is to try to give people the ability to look at their collections and say, well, actually, that's quite a lot. And we did have a lot of people early on saying to us, well, that's all good, but I don't want my wife or my partner finding out what I've actually spent and what they're actually worth.
Yeah.
And one guy even said, he said, I'm not sure I want my wife to know how much more my collection's worth, because if I die, it's going to be sold straight away. So
Yeah.
even to that extent, that people are concerned. And I think that's a part of our wargaming community, isn't it? We're a bit
Yes.
mistrustful of those parts of the hobby where we've been spending money and painting and putting all the effort in.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, actually, because it's not just the cost of the metal or the plastic now. There's that time and effort that you've put in, and how much value that adds to the cost of that initial figure. So £1, 28mm figure that you buy off whichever company, once you've put your time and effort into preparing that and painting it and varnish it and then putting a base on it or whatever, there's got to be some added value there, hasn't there, that perhaps some of us don't appreciate?
Well, I think, if you were going for a job, you'd expect a rate per hour, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
My idea is, why should that be free to somebody buying your figures off you?
Yes.
And there's a rate for the job, isn't there? In the same way, there's a rate for producing a unit of painted figures ready for the war game.
Yeah, and there's been quite a spat going on online, actually, over the last few days about the value of that paint for a commission painter.
Yeah.
How much value you put on that, because if you look at I don't know what the national minimum wage is at the moment, but let's say somewhere close to £10 an hour, and it takes somebody 2 hours to paint a 28mm figure. How many of us are willing to pay £20 for that figure?
Yeah. And there is a reasonable calculation that says, if you can get up like a factory process and you can do all these things, at a premium,
Yes.
then you're going to have to pay for a premium price, or
Yes.
like you and I spend most of your life learning how to paint and produce figures, and get a reasonable return for that.
I think the best advice I was ever given around painting figures, or I ever heard given, it wasn't directly to me, it's by Duncan McFarlane, the old editor of War Games Illustrated, who said, paint 10,000 figures and your 10,001st figure should be all right.
That sounds about right, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. There's no easy way.
No.
You've just got to put the hours in.
Yeah.
You've got to put the.
Yeah, I mean, I went to 6mm because I wanted lots of figures on the table, but they still have to be painted, prepared, and
yes,
and the amount of love and care you put into them.
Yeah,
and, you should be rewarded for that. That's my view, anyway.
Yes, well, I shall subscribe to that view. The website itself, is that a subscription site? Is there a fee for this service?
No, it's completely free. You just sign up and you use it. The thing we're trying to do at the moment is we've got a friend who works in insurance, and we're trying to get a specialist insurance for war gamers. The only thing is there's not a. We've got about nearly 2,000 people on the website, but that's worldwide. In the UK, it's about 1,000. So we just need more people registering and putting their interest into the website. So hopefully in the new year, when this all settles down a bit, we'll be doing a bit of work to try and get more traders to be involved in the site and more wargamers to just log in and use the site a bit, so that we can get this insurance company interested in providing us an insurance deal. But at the moment, if you put your collection on, you can download a PDF and send that off to your insurance company, and they'll give you a quote based on that. And that's all completely free.
Fantastic. What a great service that is. And the website for that is?
It's collectioncalculator.com.
I thought I was putting you on the spot then, Peter. I suddenly had a terrible thought, thinking, oh my goodness.
If you go into Google and you put Wargame Collection Calculator, it will show you the way. Fantastic.
Okay. So now that's out the way, as interesting as that discussion was, I don't know if you remember, Peter, in our first chat, I was incredibly excited at the prospect of you designing this system where people could pick up a booklet and use the methods in there and the templates within it to write their own rules to fight just about any battle in history. And in front of me on my tablet, I have that book, Building Rules for Gaming Battles, that you very kindly sent to me to have a look at. And you know how excited I am about this because we've messaged each other about my plans. But the reason I've got you back today, Peter, is to talk about this, because I don't think I've ever seen this done before in the hobby, and I've been gaming for 35 years, I think now. I don't think I've ever seen this concept put out there. Hence my excitement for it, and hence me spending a little bit more than I wanted when the Bacchus cart opened last week.
I ordered again as well.
Did you?
Yeah, I got my Americans for my next World War II set of rules. So yeah,
brilliant. Yeah, I couldn't resist it. Resist it. My birthday's coming up. I thought, why not treat yourself?
Splash out. Yeah. It's not another 2.25 kilos.
Not quite, mate. No. That was a hefty weight in 6 mil figures. That was. Yeah. I dread to think how many individual figures were in that pack. I have made a start. They aren't acting as insulation in my loft as most collections tend to do. Okay, so let's start at the beginning then, Peter. Talk me through how this came into existence.
Okay, as you know, David Peed, who is my co-conspirator with the Wargame Collection Calculators website, we were sitting in a pub when you could sit in a pub back in the day.
Oh, those days.
Yeah, God. Saying, right, what are we going to do to sort of get the message out? And one of my first things was, well, why don't we put a game on somewhere? And David did his usual thing and said, oh, yeah, what game's that? And I said, well, we'll have to make it up because we've never done this before. I've got lots of experience of war games and I love shows and, I'd love to put a game on. And I said, one of my favourite battles from all time was the Battle of the Little Bighorn. And I'd only ever seen that done as the last stand. Big figures, lots of Indians, last stand. I said, but I want to put on the whole battle. I'm not just interested in the last bit. I want to do the whole campaign. And I want to have a look at how we can do that. And I said, but the thing with doing a participation game is it has to be available to people who are 6 years old and people who are 60 years old plus. I said, it's got to be available to everybody and it can't last more than 45 minutes. And so what we did was we sat down, we looked at the figures we'd need, we looked at what we would hopefully try to achieve, and it basically grew from there. So we had 4 boards on the game, we had all the figures, I think we had something like 50 odd bases of 6 mil figures. And we had lots of cards and printouts and things available, and we play tested it to death, and we couldn't get it to under an hour. And we just wasn't satisfied with that, so we went back and we redrew the game and just basically pared down each of the parts of the game to make it fit into the 45 minutes, and it worked really well. And so out of that, I thought, okay, that works. And like I said earlier on, we won best participation game in the show, basically because there was a massive range of age groups who were coming along and playing, and there was lots of noise and lots of people around the table. And I just thought to myself, this is good. This is really getting a lot of people together. I mean, there were fathers bringing their children up to play and saying, how long is this going to be? So I said, about 40 minutes. So why don't you go off and do a bit of shopping and then come back and we'll probably just about be done. So it was a very popular afternoon and day.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
From the parents.
From the parents.
The kids up. Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to buy some figures. I was telling them where the Bacchus shop was. And
good.
so out of that, I kind of said to Dave, we could probably do a bit more with this. It's been very popular. People are interested in it, and we've posted it up. But I said, I've now got the bit between my teeth. I want to do another game for next year. And so Dave, with his normal aplomb, said, well, what's your next favourite battle then? Oh, there you go. I sort of remember being in my mum and dad's kitchen and having drawn a very rough map of Bunker Hill, and I had some old wooden counters that I'd repainted, and I created an old game of Bunker Hill. So I just thought that would be a really good game to do. One side sits there, the other side attacks, there's ships involved, and there's a nice map, and lots of towns and burning towns and all the rest of it. And I thought I'm gonna do that. And that's really where I thought, well, if I was to write down the process that I used for the Little Bighorn game and just put in a series of steps, a series of checks and pluses and templates and approaches that make a game accessible and simple and, above all, playable, then maybe if I wrote the building rules for gaming battles whilst I was writing the Bunker Hill rules, then that would be a really good test of a design process that people could use to create battles. I'm not one for massive complication. I know that some people are very stuck on scales and ranges and simulations, whereas I think wargaming is about painting figures, putting on a game, and having fun. So that was the whole thing behind building rules for gaming battles. So I started basically writing. I think it was back in November. I think I said to you I wanted something out by Christmas.
Yes. I didn't hold you to it, Peter.
No, of course not. But I thought, I'm not going to let Sean down. Good.
I'm glad I was at the forefront of your mind in
That's
this
it.
decision.
So I'm not going to let. Once I've said something, I'll try and keep to it.
Yeah.
So I started the process of, I suppose, writing a set of rules, but the rules are about writing rules for games. So I think we call them guidelines more than rules, because they are very flexible. You can use them for what you want. And the Bunker Hill game has proved to be really good. We managed to get in a couple of play tests before the pandemic started. We were busily putting the rules for gaming battles, which has 7 steps to it. So, that's about doing the work, doing the research, choosing a scale, building your orders of battle, making sure that you've hit the right level that you want. So, whether you want it to be a demo game, or whether you want it to be a club game, or whether you want it to be a more complex set of rules. So, those advices are all in there. And really just about testing out your processes for melee and morale and shooting and, fighting, and what happens after that. So whether there's a command check, or whether there's a way of finishing a battle really quickly, or, if there's any special rules involved, because the whole process of this is about the individual battle. It's not about writing a set of rules that will cover you from 1939 to 1945, or, the whole of the American War of Independence, or the whole of the Plains War. It's about individual battles. And that's really where it's aimed at. So somebody can pick up the book, they can have a look at it, and they can say, right, this is my favourite time period, this is my favourite battle, I'm going to recreate that in a game. So what we're hoping for is people like yourself will take that and they'll want to build a game, they'll want to base it on a battle, and they'll want to play that.
We've had the discussion about how this has influenced me, but I think what's really interesting is, and you've touched on this already, that because you got the process in place from the Bighorn game, you've then got you've built the framework of this book, and you discuss how the Bunker Hill game is built throughout the book, don't you? As that example, to say these are the guidelines or the template that you recommend to use, and this is how we've used it to move it on from the award-winning Bighorn game, to a completely different type of conflict. So whereas the Battle of the Little Bighorn was over four tables, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 4 tables. So it was a multi-table game, like a mini campaign,
and quite free flowing, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah.
In the both sides are moving round and fighting and what have you.
Yeah, and
so
there were no lines of battle.
Yes,
it was very much a large skirmish game. If
yes,
that's the right word. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, because you're playing on hexagons.
Yeah.
And each base represents a company or a unit or whatever, and has pretty much got freedom to move anywhere, hasn't it, within the table? Yeah. And converting that into what is actually quite a different style of game, isn't it? It's very much a set piece, and it's an attack defense game. So how did you manage then? How did you manage that is the question. I'm going to use far more words to ask the question, but how did you manage to get that concept from what was a very free-flowing, large skirmish game, and think or come up with that idea that these same concepts that we've built to create this game will work for a set-piece attack-defense game?
Yeah. I knew you'd come up with a really difficult question.
And I've made it far more complicated than it needed to be.
Yeah, I mean, the basic premise of the Bunker Hill game is that it is a classic attack on a defence, and it's set at the battalion level, or what passed as a battalion in those days. So each base is about 250 soldiers, whereas in Little Bighorn, it was more a sort of 50, 60 per base.
Yeah.
And that's all done, really, the initial part of that is all done in the movement part of it. So you put restrictions on movement, you give benefits to people who are in line. The support is roughly the same, but it's very different. There's battalion guns in there, so some of the lighter guns can only fire at the same target as the battalion that it's attached to. Some of the larger guns are dealt with in the special rules, so they're longer range pieces. And you can also fire some of the heavier guns or some of the guns at a longer range if they're not attached to a battalion. So those are the bits that are different. So it's really done in the movement, and it's done in the way you use your pluses and minuses to give units benefits or not, and also attacking fortifications. Now in the game, we've decided we're going to put 2 ships in there, and it took me ages to find them. And I found 2 ships that were basically from an American guy's website, where you print them out in card, and then you cut out balsa wood, and then you attach skewers and little toothpicks and threads and God knows what else. So we've built those, but they're dealt with in the special rules, where they can attack the fortification and start to reduce it. So if you start to put all those together, you can get a big set piece battle just by little changes to the movement, structure changes within the pluses and minuses of how you use these units, and the special rules to detail the special things that happen in each battle.
Yeah. And I think for me, and I've read this thoroughly over the last week or so, for me, that is, and don't blush at this, Peter, but I think that's a little bit of the genius of this, in that you've got those 7 steps that you described. But at any point along those 7 steps, there's room for that bit of creativity to come up with something that's a little bit different, a little bit of a twist, and recreates, or you can be able to recreate an iconic piece of that particular battle, because you're not looking at the whole war, or you're not looking at the 18th century as a whole. We're looking at one particular battle that's got a particular set of circumstances. And I remember you talking about worrying whether you'd be able to track down any ships when we last spoke.
That's right.
And it sounds like you've been quite successful in that. But to be able to include offshore naval and a naval component where it's not game wrecking, but the fact that they will erode the defences on the hill.
Yeah.
And I can never remember, and I've read this a couple of times now, whether it's Bunker Hill or Breeds Hill, which is the actual hill they're on. But is it Breeds Hill they're actually on?
Yeah.
But we don't know why it's called Bunker Hill yet.
No,
that's
exactly.
the one, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the ships there erode the earthworks, don't they? So it isn't about blasting away the American troops within the earthworks. It's about having that integral part of the game so they've got a purpose. They're not just there for show.
No.
And it's pretty exciting, isn't it? Yeah. Think I'm going to fire the guns from this ship in the harbour.
Yeah. And if you're anything like me, you'll row low, and it won't help.
Of course.
It'll be like Purr's roll a 1. Oh dear.
Yeah, the chances of me rolling a 1 on a D6 are definitely not 1 in 6.
Yeah.
Closer to 50-50, to be honest.
Yeah.
But for me, that's the genius, that at any point as we work around this model of designing a game, then there's the freedom and for the reader and the gamer to slot in that specific little bit which captures the whole, if you like.
Yeah, and I think there's one little rule in the Battle of Bunker Hill about the American militia actually testing their mettle.
Yes,
because there was a lot of cases of them running away, but there was a lot of cases of them actually coming back.
Yes.
So
that's true.
It was almost like they were in two minds. We're going to get out of here, but we can't let them down. And so, that was a big feature of the battle, those units. And if they didn't come back, it would have been very different. And, and rather than having loads of rules about low ammunition and all that sort of thing, we decided to use that as a measure of the man.
Yeah. Mm. And that's again, that is that little bit of a mechanism that's squeezed in there that just captures that feeling, because anybody who has read anything about the American War of Independence knows that the militia could be a little bit jumpy, and they might fall back, but they'd stop and then come back again, and you get this effect where they're perhaps a little bit more resistant than you might first think. So as we go through the process, then this 7-step process, Peter, you start off by saying work the guard lines, and that's really encompassing the whole, isn't it? To look at the whole of what you're trying to capture, and then setting the scene is talking about what is the battle that you're looking to recreate, why do you want to recreate that, and Bunker Hill, it's just one of those battles, I think, that is iconic throughout history, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think you reminded me. I think that when you sit down to write a set of rules, you can get really bogged down by jumping into the minutiae of the fighting.
Yes.
In my mind, I think if you sit down and write a little bit of an introduction, why you're doing it, where it is, what the troops are, and just like you say, set the scene, that really does give you a lot of information that you can use later on in the design process. And you don't fall at the first hurdle by saying that's too difficult. Because none of that setting the scene is difficult at all, because you're keen and you know about it. It's probably something you've read about already, and it really does set you up to write those rules. That's what I found.
And I'm finding that myself, because I may have given the game away when I called it my top secret Operation Rorke's Drift, or Dork's Rift, I think I called it, just to keep it top secret. Yeah. But we've discussed online, haven't we, about how this has inspired me to use this system for Rorke's Drift, which again is one of the most iconic battles, isn't it, that the British Army were involved in. And as well as in that initial sort of scene setting that you talk about in the book, there's a section which I love called the battle briefing, which is about getting the information across. I think you say, in fact, I can read it here, to help in getting the information across the audience. It's selling the battle to the audience, that whether that's your clubmates or whether it's people at a participation game. And we aren't talking about a thesis here or rewriting an Osprey book. We're talking about 2 or 3 paragraphs, perhaps, about who fought the battle, why was it fought, the strategy, the run up to battle, etc. And you're perfectly correct. For me, as somebody who's read this with fresh eyes, and I appreciate you've probably read this countless times, so you're fed up to the back teeth of it. But as somebody coming in fresh to it, I think that's great, because we're looking to recreate a single battle here. Okay, you could use the rules that you've written to refight any battle you want, but if we're using the system that you created in its entirety to recreate that battle, then having that understanding of why the battle was fought, what the plans were, who was involved, then you're setting your stall out, aren't you, as to what the rules are going to cover.
Yeah. Well, that battle briefing was originally Dave's idea for the demo game of Little Bighorn. So that was quite big. But it's interesting, when I was writing the Croppedy Bridge set, 1644, I didn't know that the parliamentarian commander and all these generals fell through the floor of an inn the night before.
Okay.
They all ended up in the basement.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I know. I can imagine why they were a bit off colour on the day.
Yes.
Not thinking straight. And
had they been quaffing the ale, had they?
Well, it's really weird, because that sort of thing affects the battle the following day, doesn't it?
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
I didn't know about that. It was brilliant.
No. But it's those little bits, isn't it, that you can put into this briefing, which creates that bit of interest, isn't it, and perhaps stirs the imagination to think about it. So from that bit, we then go on to, I think we go on to the terrain and looking at how your board is going to look. Now, the Bighorn game and the Bunker Hill game, you've based on hexons.
Yeah,
Hexagons, which are hexons created by Callisto.
That's right, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's a very good reason for that, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't want the rules to be so overwhelming that people needed to keep referring to them. So we thought if we keep the movement to 1 or 2 hexes, people will remember that. And it's amazing how much not measuring cuts down on time. And that is really what we found. That the time saved by using hexes is just fantastic. And there's no arguments over distance.
And in a participation game in particular, where you're looking to aim for that 45-minute slot, then I guess you're winning back 10, 15 minutes easily.
Yeah.
Where people aren't messing about or worrying about whether they've moved 10 centimetres or 9 centimetres.
Yeah.
And of course, it's not only movement; it helps with ranges, doesn't it?
It helps with so much. I mean, the core part of the game for me is the initiative, and everybody having a turn everybody having an initiative in the turn. So you're all involved all the time. So you're not sitting down for 20 minutes waiting for a cup of tea or having a chocolate, waiting for somebody else to measure their ranges and do their stuff. You're just involved, and I think that interaction makes it fun.
Yeah. So just talk about that bit then, because that's moving into the start of the actual rules, the concept of the rules that you advise, and it's common, isn't it, throughout each set that you've done now? I think you're on. Have you done 4 now?
Done 4 now. I'm working on a 5th.
Yeah. So we'll talk about the others perhaps a little bit later on, but just talk about that concept then of initiative, because you've got leaders on the table, haven't you?
Yeah.
That each rolls initiative at the start of the turn.
That's right. Each set of units has a commander or a leader, and each leader will have a bonus or a benefit, which depending on which set of rules will or will not be involved in initiative. And it's just a straight die roll for every commander on the table, and that denotes an order to the initiative. Yeah. So within a turn, every single commander on the table will have an initiative turn. And in that turn, they will have a movement, they'll have a shooting or firing, and they will have a melee, depending on whether they survive the firing and are in a position to have melee. And after that, they will apply all of the results of that game turn to their various targets or themselves. And then the game moves on to the next commander's initiative. So everybody will be either rolling dice or having to react to moves in that initiative. So you can't really sit off and not pay attention. You have to be involved, really. And that was the thing about the participation game that I think was the best thing to us. People didn't play the game where they weren't doing anything. They were always involved in the game, and that worked really well. And lots of people were really pleased that they weren't standing around waiting for somebody else to do something.
And I think, and that comes into the method of shooting and combat that you've come up with, in that it's an opposed roll. So the opponent is always involved, aren't they, throughout that sequence. So as you say, they're not getting bored, or particularly if you've got 5 or 6 people around a participation game table. Yeah. If one player is spending 10 minutes on their turn and the other 5 players have got nothing to do and no interaction or no agency in what's going on, then I suspect you're going to lose their interest.
Yeah. And
whereas, and
they're having to watch what's happening, because it may be that they get an opportunity based on somebody else's initiative results.
Yes. Yeah. And I think one of the other points that you stress is that because you're really zooming into one aspect of a particular conflict, so you're looking at one battle, you can rate the commanders on how they performed on the day.
Yes, absolutely.
So your Stonewall Jackson might have been the best general the Confederates had, but would have had an off day at some point.
Yeah. I think it was in the Peninsula campaign he wasn't very good.
Yeah.
But at Chancellorsville he was brilliant. So,
yes, yeah. Well, he wasn't so good on day 2, I don't think.
No. No. He's obviously shot his bolt then.
Yes.
On the rest now.
But you build that into the design of the game, that
Yeah.
you're allowed to reflect how well that real life commander performed on the day.
Yeah.
And again, this is down to the gamer's own agency, isn't it? That they can interpret how that commander did. And if they're a Cornwallis fanboy, then they can give whatever plus they want to that general, can't they?
Yeah.
But if they're looking to reinterpret this battle to their own idea of how that went, then they will adjust the leader's bonuses, which affect the initiative, and a couple of other bits and pieces specific to that battle and that day in particular. Which I think creates that. As we just said, Jackson wasn't always the best general, was he? He would have had that off day.
But also, it gives you the ability to actually reflect the day of battle. We all know about Napoleon. He was brilliant, but at certain times he wasn't. And in some games, that's not reflected. It can't be, because it covers such a span of time. Whereas if we're looking at gaming individual battles, then you can actually hone into what happened on that day and reflect that through these guidelines, and that's the thing we were trying to do. You can build these games and you can reuse these troops, but you just have to do a different battle. Change some of the parameters, make sure that you're getting the flavour of the day.
So that initiative sequence and the commanders are really the core, aren't they, of building this game? And when we're talking about this initiative sequence and the turn sequence, again, it's not completely prescriptive, is it? You say that in the rules, I think. I think you say for the first time you run through it, follow the guidelines as we've set them down. And see what you come up with. But absolutely, whoever ends up buying this book from you, and no doubt thousands of gamers out there across the world will be
crossed.
buying. Yeah, well, no doubt, having heard this interview, I'm sure they will.
Thank you.
Well, I really hope so, and I mean that generally. But it's in the gamer's hands, isn't it, as to how they interpret and use this as a framework. You aren't being prescriptive, are you, as to each set sequence of events?
No. I mean, I don't. You've been in the wargaming just as long as I have, and you know that every set of rules you buy, there's something in there that doesn't quite chime, and you end up trying to add house rules and redesign and redo this and redo that. And I always think that it would be good if you could just do what you wanted. And if you had a set of rules that said, or a set of guidelines that said, look, you can't break this, you just need to add to it and change it and put in special rules that counter some things, or give benefit to others, then you can do that. You can add in the turn sequence, you can add, I think I've done that where I've added a morale step, and I've added a command step as well for the whole force, because in some games, after a few rounds, people lose cohesion, panic sets in. You might need a morale check for a particular army that they need to pass every time they play because they've lost a lot of their best troops. And you can do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's in the Wargamer's gift, isn't it? The person who buys this book, it's in their gift to do that. And I was touching on that earlier about this creativity that the gamer can put into it.
Yeah.
So if they've got a really fantastic idea about something that could slip into this template that you've given, then there's room absolutely there for them to do that. Just going through the book in sequence, what I really like as well, and there's lots that I like within it, is the the shooting and the melee systems
Yeah.
are very similar. So
Yeah.
very easy. So what that means is that people, as soon as you've learnt one, then you know the other,
Exactly. Yeah.
which speeds things up. But what
Yeah.
I really like is the bit where you explain the fire opposed dice roll, where you explain the modifiers for long range, short range supporting bases,
Yeah.
and say why that's in there. And what that, for me, as somebody who's read this fresh, is it gets inside your mind as to why you've done this, why
Yeah.
you've given this bonus or this negative. So that puts the reader inside your head as to what your ideas are.
Yeah.
And then if the reader has got perhaps a bit of a different perspective on that, then they can perhaps flip it round or change it a little bit.
Well, exactly. I mean, we all have our different ways of doing stuff, but at the end of the day, we're trying to give you the tools to replicate what you want to replicate. And if you take that table and you say, well, I don't agree with that, so I want to change it, you can then use that template to write down why you've changed it. So if people ask you about it on the day or at your club, you can say, this is why I did that. And I did the same with the melee as well, because I thought that shooting and melee are the same things, they just happen at different times. And they happen in a different way. So if you survive, if you survive the shooting rounds, then you can go into melee. And I think in the Battle of the Little Bighorn, you actually get the choice of staying or running, because it's a skirmish game, and people can run away from a fight.
Yeah, definitely, and that reflects the fact that, as you say, that's a skirmish game where you've got a lot of people on horse and charging around, whereas at Bunker Hill, it is a set-piece battle. It's formed lines of...
That's right. And you've got people
battalions
forcing you up the hill.
Yes, with a big pointy stick at your back.
That's right,
yeah. And then inside the combat mechanisms that you've come up with, there's the special results table as well.
Yeah.
Which adds a little bit more interest, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, in any of this, you have to have a result, and we to speed things up, because we had the melee and the shooting were separate, and they both had their separate results tables. And during play testing, it was causing a bit of confusion. And so I said, well, there's probably a way we can write this so that they both use the same table. And so that's what we did. And it worked really well, because it's one of those things that people learn and they remember. And, by the end of them playing their 45 minutes, they were remembering what the results were for both sets of outcomes. And it was really good. Because the outcomes were the same, they knew exactly where to move their troops and what they had to do.
And again, that adds into that speed aspect, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's important, I think, that people don't lose sight of the fact that that's what this game is aiming for. And as you've said, it could be a club game, but it works really well as a participation game.
Yeah.
And for a participation game to work, you've got to have that speed. I think 45 minutes is about the maximum that most people at a show in England are willing to sit down and play a game.
Yeah.
I know in the States it's entirely different. And, well, I've talked about that with the Little Wars TV guys, Greg, that people will travel halfway across the continent and sit down for 4 hours and play a game in its entirety. But in this country, to get people, and I'm sure you've experienced this, to get people to sit down and buy into spending 45 minutes at a gaming table can be challenging.
It can be challenging because they want to do other stuff. They want to have a look around.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly natural. They spent a lot of time and effort to get there.
Yes.
So if you wanted to sit at your table for a little while, you've got to put on something that's a bit different,
Yeah. Yeah. And that 45-minute time window, I think, is perfect. That if for nothing else than to rest your weary legs and keep the wallet in the pocket.
Exactly, yeah. But alternatively, a club night, and I've experienced this all over the place. You get to club, it's 7:30. Time you set up, it's sort of 8:15, and then you're getting your cup of tea and you're having a chat and all the rest of it, and you don't have loads of time.
No. No, couple of hours, 2.5
Yeah, a
hours.
couple of hours. So you could have a couple of games of this, or you could write your rules to suit a club night.
If it's anything like my club night, Peter, it's we'd play the game once and then just sit talking.
Talking about
The
what we
next
wanted
hour
to
and a half.
change.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I remember those days.
Yeah.
God, yeah.
So once we get through that, the ideas that you've put in there for combat and melee, we go into sort of talking about rounding the rules out, I guess, where we're looking at the order of battle,
Yeah.
and presentation
Mm.
of the rules. And again, you've provided sort of a template, haven't you, to be able to and I suspect this is more aimed at the people who want to put on participation games at shows to make it attractive.
Yeah.
Because if you've just photocopied a couple of sides of A4 and it's just blank text, well, it's okay, but how many people are going to be attracted to that? Whereas I well remember the first time I saw your Little Bighorn game, and the presentation of it is eye-catching and draws people in. It's a bit like Moss to a Flame, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we had the battle briefing done in a separate booklet. We had the rules in a separate booklet. We did the cards for all of the commanders and all of the American Indian commanders, and we had lots of I think we had cards for when your leaders got wounded or killed. And it looked really good. We spent a lot of time thinking, even if people didn't want to play, they could still take stuff away with them, and I think that worked really well. And so
And
I
how
think doing that to a standard for us has really worked.
and how many times did somebody ask you how much the rules were?
About 5 or 6 times when we were at Salute, he said, "Well, no, you can
Yeah.
have them. How much do these cost?" "Oh, they're free. You can take them away with you." People just didn't believe you.
No. Well, it's free.
Yeah,
There's a catch.
You're mad.
It's got to be a catch.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for if somebody buys this book with a view to putting on a participation game, I think the template and the ideas that you've put within this section towards the back is great, because you give that advice, don't you?
Yeah.
And say how are you going to make this thing.
Yeah, and I think it comes to that sort of thing. We had banners. We got a couple of banners done because I got to a point where I thought I wanted people to see us before they actually came up to the table.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you look at the table and you think, I don't know what this is for. I don't know what this is about.
Yes.
And having a banner that says it's the Battle of the Little Bighorn, it kind of just sends a message. And I think that I think those banners cost us about £70, I think, which is quite a lot. But getting a year's worth of use out of it, it's quite good.
Yeah. And again, you put into it as much as you want to, don't you? You haven't got to go out and spend money on a banner, but it certainly helps, I think.
Yeah.
One towards the end of the book, and I suspect this is probably one of the most important bits for yourself as a rules writer, you talk about playtesting and how important playtesting is to getting the feel of the game, the pace of the game, and the little bits of the rules right. So just talk us through the playtesting aspect.
Well, I was luckily enough, I've got this amateur group of people who know nothing about war games, who know a lot now, who come around and help paint figures, and they help play test rules, and they set up the game, and they ask really weird questions. And it's absolutely true. Sometimes you go, "What? I don't know why I wrote that. That doesn't work." I'm gonna have to. I literally filled up 2 sides of A4 the first time we wrote the Battle of the Little Bighorn, and started putting in little changes that just should change the emphasis of certain rules and certain bits and pieces of the rules. It's really important to get that done. Certainly with your first set, I would say, just so that you can get it in your head that you're writing for other people, because we all war gamers, we tend to write for ourselves, and even your feedback showed that you write for yourself because you just assume that other people have read it or they've done it or they've got experience. So it's really important to play that game a number of times so that you can just test out. It's true in IT, isn't it? Give it to a user, they'll break it straight away. And that's the key to it, is give it to a war gamer and they'll break it straight away. So play testing is really important. And I did so much testing on my own that sometimes it's just not enough. You just get a couple of people out there to test it with you, and it will just make it flow so much better.
Well, you've actually written a bit of a flowchart, haven't you, about the playtesting process?
Yeah.
I love the pictures that you've got in there with the joy on the faces of there's two ladies in one of the pictures. Look like one of them's certainly very happy, and I'm not sure about the look on the face of the other lady. But
I think one of those is my wife.
Okay.
She's probably the very happy one.
Right, I think she just rolled a 6 by the looks of it.
Yeah.
But you've got quite a thorough playtesting process there, haven't you?
Yeah.
About play the rules by yourself, make your notes, and then eventually you open it up to the testers.
Yeah.
And then get the feedback and then start again. But I think for me, and I have never written a set of rules. I've helped to playtest rules previously, but I've never written a set of rules. But I imagine one of the most nervous points is where you let it out of your hands.
That's
and
it.
Give it to somebody else to have a look at.
Definitely. And I think it's one of those things where I'm a big believer in play testing, but don't overdo it, because you can over process stuff. So I think from my point of view, you go through it a few times and then you go, right, that's it, we're ready.
Yeah. Because I suspect you could just go on tweaking and tweaking
forever.
And you've written proper rules. Not that these aren't proper rules, but do you know what I mean? You've had rule sets published previously, haven't you? For big thick rule sets.
Yeah, for American Civil War, the Palamos set, and the Franco-Prussian War. And I've got some other sets that are in the background at the moment, but still being worked on for the Wars of the Roses and the Colonial Wars. So lots of experience of doing that, and just making sure you're prepared for the forum is a really big thing. I've found, especially with the American Civil War set, because they had a really good, what I thought was a good flow, but some people just couldn't get their heads around it because they wanted to control everything. And so if you were a war gamer that was used to having everything under your control and doing everything you wanted to do when you were doing it, then it took a lot of explaining. Right.
So when you talk about that, you're talking about that scrutiny that the subject matter experts talk about as soon as they get it into their hands, and they're putting their own spin on it, and war gamers are champion complainers.
Yeah,
we are. Well, we're champion complainers and moaners, aren't we?
There was one guy at Salute who actually came up and said to Dave, he said, "It looks really good, but the grass is the wrong colour." And Dave said, "The grass is green." And he went, "Yeah, not in July. Not in July at that place." Oh dear. There's only so much we can do.
There is. Yeah. You can please some of the people some of the time.
Yeah, not all of the people any of the time, really.
There you go. Not in wargaming, you can't.
No, exactly. But it was a good piece of feedback.
Yeah. And then I think step 7, when we get to the back of the book, we get a rather nice picture of yourself there, Peter, holding
Thank you very much.
An award.
A trophy.
A trophy. And I think you said earlier on, and I meant to pull you up on it actually, Peter, you said we won the best participation game at the show, as though it might just be a little show that's down the road in a village hall. We are talking about the single biggest show in the country.
So it was Salute.
That's the bit that needs highlighting because
I think it's the only 6mm war game that's ever won anything.
Yeah,
as a participation game at Salute. So we were we were proud anyway, but we were particularly proud of that. And I
Yeah.
think we saw off a lot of newcomers as well, a lot of other participation games.
Well, there was strong competition,
Yes,
most definitely.
yeah.
I was running a participation game that day, Peter.
Oh, I'm
and
so
let-
sorry. Yeah. Shall I take my foot back out of that?
No,
Sorry.
mate, no. I was demoing for Mantic Games actually,
Ah,
so
Right.
it was an entirely different venture, completely. But do you know, when I heard about that, and I know we talked about it when we last spoke on the podcast, and I've shouted it from the hilltops ever since. I can't tell you how chuffed I was that you'd won it. Not just because it was a 6-0 game, but because of the effort. Because I've followed the progress on Twitter. I think you put up quite a few posts on
Yeah,
Twitter.
put up a few blogs. Yeah,
On
quite
your
a few
blog.
blogs on the process of how we built it, got it all put together, and from just the metal figures through the basing, through it's the whole thing. It was really good.
Well, and again, we've spoken about this before, and you have mentioned it just about this amateurish group that you've got, and I still marvel at the fact that you've roped in these non-war gamers, not only to get them to play the game with you, but to paint the figures and prepare the whole thing. I think that's just
build some of the terrain and paint buildings, and God knows they're brilliant. I love them every Monday night. Obviously not recently, but we're looking to get it back together.
Yeah, I hope so. And you know, that part of that is why I was so chuffed about it, because it's just such a unique take, and I will forever take off my hat to you, Peter, for that. So essentially that's the book, isn't it? That's what the concept you're selling. And I'll go back to the earlier comment that I've never heard of this before. I don't think this has ever been done before, where somebody has put together some ideas and concepts and templates to sell to somebody to be able to create their own game. And as I've mentioned a couple of times already, this has inspired me, somebody who's never written a set of rules before, or thought about building a participation game, to do so for Rorke's Drift. So, first of all, do you think Rorke's Drift is a good subject?
I think it's excellent. I mean, some of the email stuff we've sent around, I think you've taken a very different. You've used the guidelines in a very different approach, which I think is fantastic.
Right.
You know, with the massive forces of the Zulus and the small force of the British, and using character-driven commanders is just really good. I hate to say it, if we've inspired you, then the job's done.
Okay.
And and I think some of the early ideas I've seen of your game are really, really good.
Well, I will continue to share with you, and I'll share with listeners, obviously, as time goes on. Perhaps after the book's published. I don't want to give away too many secrets. But I think one of the when I first heard of this concept, Rorke's Drift was immediately the battle that came to mind. It's a I don't know any war game that has never seen Zulu. Okay, it plays a bit loose with history, but most war game. I don't know one war game that doesn't like the film Zulu. Never mind anybody that hasn't seen it. But so therefore, it's always been a battle that I've always wanted to try and recreate. But it's that asymmetrical side of it that I think is the challenge, isn't it? And you have essentially got a static defense. Okay, a very small static defense against a very overwhelming number of aggressors, but it's that bit about trying to how do you work the concepts that you've built into this game into a battle where you've got 150 against around about 4,000 troops. But I'm
sorry to interrupt, but I'm already thinking of a couple of special rules around the volley.
Yeah. Well, please share them with me. I've thought about volley as a concept, and where do you start the battle? So, do I start it with the Zulus in range, or at very long range, or do I have the Zulus moving into range and then the British getting a couple of volleys off, or
Yeah,
you know, and I'm sure you've been through this whole process, and anybody
absolutely.
that buys this book will go through the same thought process.
Yeah,
Because I think those initial ideas are that's where all the thinking happens before you actually put pen to paper, aren't
yeah,
they? And I think we talked about it off air, where
yeah,
I've made copious notes, but I've not actually committed anything into a document yet.
yeah.
But you do that big concept thinking about what is it you want to represent.
And that provides your wrapping. Once you've got your wrapping, you can then design your rules into that.
Yeah,
And that's the thing. What's the outcome? And also you have to sort of think, do I make it? Does one person play the British and the rest play the Zulus? It all comes down to that balance, isn't it? Do I have like we said before, do you have 2 commanders or 3 commanders for the British?
yes.
Colours aren't born. The big effect on the battle, maybe give him a command.
Yeah, and that wasn't so. And we've spoke about this over email, but my initial concept was that you'd have one British player as Chard, one British player as Bromhead, and then hopefully 2 or 3 people as the Zulu. But when you said why not have a couple of sergeants as well to assist with that overall command around the mission station, and that's something that's now in my thinking about perhaps having them as a lesser effective commander, but all the same having some impact on the game. So it's very early stages, but I'm very excited because I've ordered the figures. I'm probably going to have a little play around with a few counters and what have you to push around just to get the concept, because I'm probably not going to go the hexagon route, which goes against a little bit about that speed element. But initially, this is going to be a game for the club, where we'll have that extra time.
But also, you've got a nicely tightly defined space, haven't you?
Yes.
So maybe the hexes are not needed.
Possibly, but I think, although I won't be using hexes, I'll be using measuring sticks. So hopefully there'll be no tape measures involved. So for long range fire, I think within the rules we talk about 2 hexes. So I'll just have a measuring stick that's 20 centimeters, which is roughly the length of 2 hexes, and then short range will be 1 hex, 10 centimeters, just to try and keep that easy, where you can just pick up a stick, put it down on the table, and still and because it'll be rather similar to the Little Bighorn in that it'll be almost a skirmish, a large skirmish action. So there's no need for formation changes or wheeling or anything. So hopefully the movement will be relatively easy, the firing will be easy, and the fighting will be easy. But I'm making it sound really easy.
I'm really looking forward to it now.
Yeah. Well, Peter, you'll certainly be the first to see any version of it that I send out. And just speaking about that, actually, you talk about publishing any rules that people come up with.
Yeah,
or assisting to publish.
Yeah, we're more than happy to help. I think that's the thing. We're more than happy to help people realise their vision, if you like. I think it's important that I think every wargamer should publish a set of rules during their time, and hopefully this will help to assist. I always wanted to build a tank game, and then Two Fat Lardies brought out their excellent tank game. So I had to build mine around platoons of tanks rather than individual tanks. So fire and move armour is already done, so that will be available. Which is, again, a big change and a big shift that really stretched the guidelines in the game, in the building rules for gaming battles. But then I'd gone back to doing Croppity Bridge, which again is going back to that multiple board sort of mini campaign for the English Civil War, which was, again, quite a challenge, really, but I really enjoyed writing them. So hopefully people will like those as well. So my idea is to get a battle that I like from a lot of periods to show people how those guidelines can be used in different periods.
Yeah, and again, you've been very gracious to send me through copies of those. And the Crop Ready Bridge one, the English Civil War, is another favourite period of mine, and that is just, for me, a wonderful concept that you've gone for this mini campaign again, similar to the Little Bighorn. You're on multiple tables, where each table can have an influence on the next one along. And if ever you get that out to a public showing, Peter, I'd love to have a go at that.
That's the one that we're going to do that following Bunker Hill. So hopefully, if we can get Bunker Hill out on the table this year, then Croppedy Bridge will be the following year.
So will that be the plan for Joy of Six when it takes place next year now?
Yeah, next year is Bunker Hill. Hopefully we'll get that on the table for then. Now that I've actually built the ships, that's the main big point done. Just need to...
I don't know. Have you put any pictures up of those, Peter? I don't know if
I put a couple up, but I might have put them up to our local little group, but I'll put some out just to show you those, so you can have a look at them. But I've literally tomorrow I'm getting the sailors to go on the ships.
Oh, fantastic!
So I might hold fire for a couple of days just so I can paint up a few of those and stick them on.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And so that'd be that interested in doing that. Bunker Hill at Joy of Six, and then the following year we'll do Croppedy Bridge.
Brilliant. So, are you looking at continuing using this system for your own participations games going forward? Then post Crop Ready Bridge, or
I've got one. My uncle fought in Burma during the war, and I found out quite a lot about him recently. He won the military medal for bravery, fighting against the Japanese near Kohima. Not at Kohima, but one of the forces that came down to relieve it. And I got really into sort of, small unit action. So I'm going to do a fire and move infantry. So all based around platoons. And then I think at some point in the future, somebody will make me do fire and move armour and infantry.
It's the natural progression.
It's the natural progression. So there's still lots to do. I'm really keen. And if this all lifts off, then we're going to put a forum up on the site so we can answer questions and manage people's inquiries. So we'll see. So big changes coming up. Yeah, good.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So let's talk about timelines then, Peter. We've spoke for getting on for an hour, maybe just over an hour now, about this fantastic book that I've got on my tablet in front of me, Building Rules for Gaming Battles. Yeah. What's the timeline for listeners to get hold of it?
Okay, well, that's all been, all the rules are ready and waiting to be published, and Building Rules for Gaming Battles is ready to be published as well, but we're just getting the website ready for people to be able to purchase those. But to be honest, we're doing them in PDF, but we'll also do them as books, softback books, so people can have them as in their hands. So once that website's up and we've got that ready, we're really hoping to get that pushed out for sort of early September. So hopefully by early September people will be able to purchase these if they want them, and shortly after that, I think. We'll be putting up the forum on the website, or it won't be our forum, it'll be a forum that people could come on and ask questions of us if they want to. So we'll be supporting them.
Fantastic. Well, we're recording here on the 20th of August. Hopefully this podcast will be out within the week. I'm thinking probably middle to end of next week. So around about the 26th, 27th, something like that. So hopefully they'll have a listen to this and be able to come over and have a look at it. So shall I send them to the collectioncalculator.com website for more information?
More information. We're constantly putting up blogs about progress on various projects in our news section. They'll be seeing all of that hopefully available quite soon then.
And you're also on Twitter, aren't you?
Yeah, we're on Twitter and Facebook. Mainly Twitter, I would say. Yeah. But Facebook we tend to do as well.
And is that Wargamer CC at Wargamer CC, something like that?
Yes, it's Wargamer CC or the Facebook one. I can't remember. It's
I'll put
Collection
it up in the show.
Calculator, I think.
Collection Calculator.
Yeah, thanks. I knew you'd have a question I wouldn't be able to answer.
Well, that's what I'm here for, mate. To make your life easy.
Yeah.
Well, I'll put links up in the show notes
Brilliant.
for that anyway, with the email address, etc., and details. But is there anything we haven't covered regarding the book, Peter? I'm still incredibly excited for it.
No, I think we've covered that. I think that's all ready. It's all ready to go. It's just sort of bar the shouting, really. So I think we've got a couple of little changes that you fed back to us to make, and then it's ready to go. So,
well, I mean, literally was a couple of little things. It was nothing.
Yeah. But it was still relevant.
Yeah, and it's probably that fresh pair of eyes.
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
I know if you read a document 1,000 times, then it's you can send out anything into the world, and somebody reading it for the first time will pick up a missed full stop or something.
And I suppose the one thing I could say is I really hope people are as keen as you are about them. I tell you, that sort of feedback sort of makes it all worthwhile, Sean. So thank you for that.
No. I mean, it is absolutely genuine. This isn't a paid advertisement. It's absolutely from a fan-based angle. Get my words out in a minute. I just love the concept, and having seen the Little Bighorn game and then read through this book along with the Crop Ready Bridge and Bunker Hill, and I'm completely sold on it, because it just feeds into everything that I like about gaming. And again, we aren't talking about a game here or designing a game that counts every rivet and every bullet. That's not what this is about. This is about, as you said right at the start, about getting some figures on the table and having a fun game in a period that you enjoy and recreating a battle that you love. And this, following the guidelines in this book, absolutely allows you to do that. So absolutely hats off to you, Peter, and the team for the work that you've done around it, because I shall be shouting it from the rooftops. As I've said a couple of times, I will be plugging this wherever I can.
Well, from the team and I, thank you very much for that, Sean. It's been great talking to you as well. I mean, it's nice to actually sit down and talk wargamings for over an hour.
Who knew that two wargamers could just waste an hour?
Yeah, who knew that we could just chunter on?
Exactly. Thanks to you, Peter, for giving up your time again. And you are now in a very select group of people who've appeared on the podcast twice.
Oh, thank you very much.
I think there's only 3 people now who've appeared twice. I don't know if you remember, there's 2 rules, though, for every appearance. And again, I keep saying I will give my guests fair notice and fair warning about this. There's 2 rules. The first rule is a very simple one, is that you agree to come back on again.
Yes, of course.
Which I'm sure you will do.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll catch up face to face at some point, whether it's Salute or at the Joy of 6. But I'll look forward to that. The second, though, is the God's Own Scale Virtual Library. Now, you did deposit a book there on your first visit. I can't quite remember what it was, to be honest. That's professionalism in podcasting for you. But I do insist that every guest, whether or not it's the first visit or the 10th, deposits a book on the shelves of the God's Own Scale Virtual Library. And it has to be military history or wargaming related.
Okay.
It can't be the latest Jilly Cooper book.
Okay.
As good as that might, unless there's a wargaming element in there. I don't know. Yeah. Jilly Cooper may have moved on. But have you got something for me, Peter? I'm rambling on a little bit here, hoping that you might pull something off the shelf.
Time to think.
Yes. And I've got to say, it's got to be something other than building rules for gaming battles.
Yeah. Well, I'm into that. I tell you what, I've gone back and reread The Good Shepherd, which the film Greyhound is based on. The new Tom Hanks film. Yeah. And I must say, it is absolutely excellent.
Right. Okay.
So
Excellent.
for
Should we
me,
put
it's
that
the Good
in there?
Shepherd, from the guy who wrote all the Hornblower books, C.S.S. Forrester.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he wrote a book about the Second World War, and it's about a convoy just travelling from America to England. And it's a very compelling book, I must say. Lots of
That should.
trigonometry,
Oh, crikey! I
but
might
don't let
struggle.
that put you off.
All right. All right. As long as you promise that it
Yeah.
won't blow my brain.
Yes.
That shall take pride of place on the God's Own Scale virtual library shelf. Thank you for that. The Good Shepherd by C.S. Forrester. Peter, once again, I'm going to thank you for your time, and that has been fascinating chat. And I'm very excited, as I'm sure people listening to this podcast will be, to get their hands on that. So thanks very much for your time, Peter.
Thanks very much, Sean.
Mademoiselle from Armentier, save to you. Sing it with all your heart and soul and see everyone right up the pole. Mademoiselle from Armentier.
Welcome back to the God's Own Scale studio. I hope you enjoyed that chat as much as I did. And please do check out the Book on Wargames Collection Calculator website. I'm sure Peter would appreciate it. It really is a great effort from him and the team. Apologies, it was slightly later than planned, but birthdays and decorating at home have eaten into my hobby time, so much so that I've got really little to report on my own hobby. Other than some canopy style woods inspired by the guys at Little Wars TV, I've used rubberized horsehair for mine, and for the cost of a new tub of cocktail sticks, they've cost me so far the grand total of £1, which is good in anybody's money. And I've been using materials I already had at home, such as flocks and paint, etc. I'll post some more pictures up as soon as possible to Twitter and to the blog. I did put up one or two of the concept stage, but the final versions I'll make sure I get some pictures up. I've really enjoyed doing them. They look quite good, actually. In hobby news, I've got to say I was really pleased to see Sally and Paul from the wonderful Callistra Miniatures and hosts of the Hammerhead show at Newark Showground announced that they were going to go full steam ahead in planning for the Hammerhead show next year on the 6th of March 2021. I think this sends out a really positive message to the community, and we can all hope that in 6 months' time that things will have settled down to the point where we can once again return to shows in a physical form as opposed to the virtual shows we've had to resort to this year. Hammerhead is a fantastic show, real emphasis on participation games, inclusion, involvement, so right up my street, to be honest. And if the show goes ahead, I shall certainly be there, and who knows, I may be able to do some roving reporting from the show, which obviously I'll put up onto the podcast. Regarding the virtual shows, quick shout out to Mike Whitaker, former co-host of Meeples and Miniatures and his own podcast. I think it's called The Miller's Tale, which is a great podcast. And Mike, if you're listening, I really hope you get behind the mic soon and get some more content out there. Really enjoy listening to you on there. But he's the chair of the club that runs the Hereward show in early September, which went online this year. And it was a really great effort, I thought, with some great videos, including an English Civil War battle report. There was a chat with Harry Sidebottom and Rich Clark about historical gaming and using story in games. And also a panel discussing the question that's on everyone's lips. Is historical gaming dying out? Ooh, there's a big one. Well, for my money, I don't think it is, for what it's worth. But I'm not sure I'm seeing the younger generation coming through into the historical hobby that we've had previously. I don't know, this might just be my perspective. It's anecdotal. I've got no evidence to support that at all. It's just how I feel. Certainly within my own club, there's very few people below the age of 30 interested in historical gaming. Generally, they are into the fantasy and science fiction style games. I just don't think there's that many youngsters coming through, and whether they're enough to sustain the hobby going forward, I don't know. The hobby has never really been in such a strong position, I think, as it is now, with every aspect of the hobby available to buy at your fingertips from the commercial point of view. The commercial side seems stronger than ever, with more manufacturers putting out more and more figures in every scale, terrain, 3D printing, gaming mats, this sort of thing. But they will need the next generation of gamers to come along and buy their products once the older grognard generation have passed on. So recruitment and retention are incredibly vital. Little Wars TV have just posted a video with some ideas in this vein, so as ever, do go and check them out. I'm sure most of the listeners to this podcast already do. And speaking of Little Wars TV, episode 17 is already recorded and 90% edited. And that's a chat with Greg and Steve from Little Wars about the future of their YouTube channel. As I record this, it's the 10th of September, so expect to see that episode dropping into your favourite podcast app within the next 7 to 10 days. Thanks once again to my Patreon supporters. I've now renamed you as the Patriots. Their support is humbling as they trust me to produce this podcast from my kitchen 2, maybe 3 times a month. And they really do help to keep the lights on. If you wish to help to keep the lights on, please do consider joining my Patreon campaign if you enjoy what I'm doing. I'll put a link up in the show notes. There'll also be a link up on the YouTube channel where this podcast is also available on Spotify now as well. But the direct link is patreon.com/God's Own Scale. That'll take you straight to the campaign and show you what's going on there with 1 or 2 blog posts from me, and who knows, a live stream or 2 in the future, maybe a Q&A with Patriots. But it's in early stages, but being developed, and hopefully will be a useful resource to anybody who joins up. One more thing, sorry, I nearly forgot then. One more thing, I wanted to give a shout out to a new company to me called Geek Villain Wargaming Specialists. Now, they've got 1 or 2 things on offer if you go to their website, which is geekvillain.co.uk. But what's caught my eye mostly, and I've seen it's caught a lot of other people's eyes within the community, is their new gaming mats. They look amazing. I haven't picked one up myself yet, but I think Per has bought one, Per Broden from roller1.com. They're made of a fleecy material, which really intrigues me because I was looking at making my own play mat using some fleece that I sprayed and painted and shaped myself, but this might do the trick and save me all the trouble of the experimentation, and they look amazing. For a 6x4 mat, you're looking around about £60. They've got, lots of designs, let's say, on their website, so do check them out. Really friendly on Twitter as well. They've got an active presence on Twitter, so if you're on Twitter as well, do hit them up and give them a shout out. So that's Geek Villain and the website geekvillain.co.uk. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks for listening. Look out for loads more as we head into the autumnal season and the dark nights start to creep in. Yes, it's that time of year already. You'll need something to occupy you on those lonely nights whilst embarking on the winter painting campaign. And I hope you make that God's Own Scale podcast. Until next time, as ever, keep talking about 6.
Brother Bertie went away to do his bit the other day, with a smile on his lips and his left hand pips upon his shoulder, bright and gay. As the train moved out, he sang, remember me to all the birds. Then he wagged his paw and went away to war, shouting out these pathetic words. Goodbye, goodbye, wipe a dear baby dear from your eye. Though it's hard to part, I know, I'll feel sicker than death to go. Don't cry, don't sigh, there's a silver lining in the sky. Bonsoir, all things, cheerio, chin chin, na boo, toodaloo, goodbye. At the concert down at Kew, some convalescents dressed in blue. Had to hear Lady Lee, who had turned 83, sing all the old songs she knew. Then she made a speech and said, I look upon you boys with pride, and for what you've done I'm going to kiss each one. Then they all grabbed their sticks and cried, goodbye, goodbye, went a dear baby dear from your eye. Though it's hard to part, I know, I'll feel sicker than death to go. Don't cry, don't sigh, there's a silver lining in the sky. Bonsoir, all things, cheerio, chin chin, na boo, toodaloo, goodbye. Little Private Patrick Shaw, he was the prisoner of war. Till the Hun with the gun called him pig dog for fun, then Paddy punched him on the jaw. Right across the barbed wire fence, the German dropped, then dear, oh dear. All the wire gave way and Paddy yelled, hooray, as he ran for the Dutch frontier. Goodbye, goodbye, wipe a dear baby dear from your eye. Though it's hard to part, I know, I'll feel sicker than death to go. Don't cry, don't sigh, there's a silver lining in the sky. Bonsoir.